Hey guys, welcome back. Today, as it looks in the description, we are talking about chants. I know that most people only think of Gregorian chants, but there's a lot more style. How do I say this? A wider variety of chants out there than that. What I specifically want to cover is something that my friend has asked me to do for her, which is help her better understand the notation that she's looking at. Firstly, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. I know, yawn. I'll try to make this as entertaining as possible, and I'll try to keep this in 10 minutes. The history and how to read it all together. Firstly, you should know it was one of the first methods used to write notation. And so it is very basic and very stripped down, so you probably won't even find measure markings. So the bars that separate the measures, you probably won't see those. You won't see stems, you won't see flags, you won't see a time signature, you probably won't even see a metronome marking or tempo. And you may not even see lines. If it's old enough, you might not get the classic 4 spaces and 5 lines. You might just have one line and then the information sits around that, or you might just have words and some dots or squares or something that looks like it should have been cursive or running writing. And I admit I can't read all Gregorian chant, or forgive me, all chant, because there are at least 8 different styles of notation for it, and each one comes from a different location on the planet. So, and that has everything to do with the expansion of Christianity throughout those parts of the world, which was the reason for the existence of that music in the first place. So forgive me if I'm stammering. This is not a subject that I know a lot about, so I'm really stretching myself because I don't normally cover it. The notation is usually fairly easy to read. If it looks like you're supposed to go up, then you go up. If it looks like you're supposed to go down in pitch, then you go down in pitch. Some of the, I believe some people call it plain song notation or chant notation, will even have breath marks inserted into the music, and you'll even see something that looks like measure markings. But don't count on all that information being there. You may have to feel your way through it. You may have to hear someone else perform that same piece before you can really get your head around it. In other cases, if you have a music director, they will have an idea for what they want and just follow their cue and ask them for helpful hints on how to get through the music, especially if it's a bit lengthy, because the information tends to feel a bit repetitive, and a lot of vocalists have trouble with this. Now, originally, the music was supposed to have been solo a cappella. So you have a solo vocalist with no accompaniment. It was also meant for, say, a solo vocalist and an instrument that they are playing. In other cases, it was meant to be for an entire choir. However, everyone in that choir sang the same notes, so they sang the same pitches at the same time. And in this sense, it's very basic and it's very simple, but it is still very, very beautiful. It is elegant. So when you're trying to interpret this, which by the way chants are open to interpretation, keep these things in mind. Also keep in mind the context of the subject. So make sure you know what you're singing about before you start trying to perform it, because if you don't know the subject and then you go and perform this, the audience may very well realize that and think, wow, that was the wrong facial expression, or gee, didn't they slide those two words together a little oddly? So make sure you know what it is you're actually singing. That's my biggest piece of advice. To a modern musician, chant music looks incomplete because of so much that is lacking. And because the Unbreakable 3, which I will do a different video on, I won't go into in depth in this video for that because it can get very confusing. What I call the Unbreakable 3, since they're not there, you're going to be very likely to feel confused. And so this friend of mine, she asked me, she said, can you help me? This music, it's chants, it has very little information, I feel so lost, there's no time signatures, can you help me identify time signatures? I have agreed to give her one-on-one advice on this, and that's quite fine. I won't go in depth in this video on exactly how to read it, because it is a learned skill, I admit, but I don't have any of that sheet music here. It's just not something that I'm that keen on. Other than that, you'll get a feel for it. If you've already handled modern notation, you'll be fine. You will. You'll be okay. Especially if you're not sight reading cold, as I like to call it, where you're having to try and perform this piece of music without ever having heard it or seen it before. Yeah, I've done that a lot. It's no fun. It's a massive challenge, and I've done even more than that where I had to sight transpose cold. So I had to transpose the information I was reading at the same time while sight reading and never having heard that piece of music ever in my life. So try not to do that with chants, especially when they've been written in the older style notation, because there won't be a whole lot of information there. If it's just something that you're performing for yourself, or maybe you just want to perform your own interpretation and you're not really having to follow someone else's idea on how it should be performed, just knock yourself out, have some fun. Yeah, I do highly advise at least listening to a few different versions, if not one, so you can get your head around the idea. And go ahead, if it's something that you're interested in doing on a regular basis, looking at this stuff, trying to perform it, trying to sing it, maybe play it on an instrument, then get your head around how Gregorian chants are usually felt. It's water music of a different variety. At least that's what it is for me. It's very fluid, and it continues to move. And when done properly, it will move the audience, so they will have a heartfelt reaction towards what you're doing. And that's when you know you've done something. So other than that, there are some very specific symbols that you can use to identify certain features within the music. Again, I don't have any of that sheet music here. I'll have to order some, so forgive me. That's part of the reason why I wanted to keep this video short, is because I've only had just a minimal amount of experience with chants, and when I did, it wasn't in its classic historical form. It was in a more modern format, and what the arranger had done was taken an older piece and threw harmonies over it, and then put it in modern notation. And it came out really beautiful, I admit, but I recognized it for what it was when I was performing it, and I thought, oh, this is really nice. This is very tastefully done, and I wish I could remember the name of the arranger. I would give them credit, but I can't. That was back when I was in uni as a member of a chamber ensemble, so that was many, many moon ago. I have slept since then. I hope this has been helpful. I know there's not a lot of information here, but that's because there's not a lot of information in chant notation. Check out Google. Look up square notation. Okay, there is a modern expression of a lot of the old versions, and if you're used to looking at notation, again, well, modern notation, as most of us understand it, you look at plain song or chant notation in its modern form, it will look very familiar, and it will be easy to understand. And if you search Google Images, I'm sure you will be able to find square song, I'll think of it in a minute, square notation images, and you'll find charts that break everything down so that it's easier to understand, because with so many different varieties of notation from that time period, it can get a little bit confusing. And there is a symbol that I noticed wasn't available in the modern version of square notation, and I say square notation even though technically that's French. It's the best term I have, sorry. So there is a symbol that's not recognized in the modern version that is recognized in all these older versions. And I want you to look at that specifically, because when I looked at it, I realized what it was, and it was Punctum and somebody else combined, and it was the ascending series of pitches. So you have a pitch and then an ascending series of pitches, as well as what to me looks like a trill, but I don't know. You guys check it out, have a look at that. If you can find charts that identify these things, by all means look into that. Some chants do have some kind of markings that you can use to help you better identify accents and rests. Sometimes you'll find breath marks even. You might find markings that look like measures to identify bars. Oh, excuse me. You might find markings that identify themselves as measures and bars. But yeah, it's just very simple. And so therefore it is open to interpretation, and originally it was designed to remove a lot of angst between monks, because they would get upset at each other because one day during rehearsal we're supposed to perform this particular section descending in pitch, and then the next day the director wants them to perform it ascending. What are you doing? You are confusing us. And so, monks are human, okay? They're still human. So, they wanted a system that would help kind of take some of that angst and frustration out. And this is what I have been told happened to create these sets of notation that we see in the 9th and 10th centuries. So enjoy, have fun, explore it. Nearly 15 minutes worth of information. I've tried to narrow it down as much as possible. I will expand on more of these details, particularly the Unbreakable 3, later on in another video, and I will also have a sight reading video, so keep your eyes open for that. And hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on some chant sheet music that I can show you guys and walk you through and kind of give you an idea of how to work with it. Catch you later.